Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be setting up my journal for the month of February, and of course I'm using my bullet journal by Archer and Olive, and you can use my code ARTandBujas to get 10% off. And as always, I'm starting off with a little flip through of my previous setup. I actually forgot to include it last time, but I really enjoyed this theme and it was just very simple and fun to make. And then for this month I kind of wanted to do a mix of two of my old themes, which you can see on the screen. So one is a eucalyptus theme and the other one was a ginkgo leaves theme, and I did this one quite a while back, but I really love the yellow, so I wanted to make a kind of new version of it. And if you're curious about the products, I'm going to be listing them in the description as always, so let's get started. The first page I'm making is a small overview of the month, and I'm starting with the bright yellow on the top as a background for the weekdays. This time I'm using a bit of a thicker black fineliner because I wanted to use it for the doodles as well, and that way it was just nice and consistent. Here I'm just writing the weekdays in black and then the dates underneath with my usual palette juice pen. Each day is 2 spaces wide, and then I'm writing the dates into 1 space and also leaving 1 space empty in between each week. Next I'm filling those spaces with a line in this light green shade that I will be using for the eucalyptus leaves later on, and also to cross out the empty days in the calendar. For the cover page, I wanted to kind of remake the design from my old setup, so I wanted to include the yellow circle in the background, but with eucalyptus branches this time. And I just started by drawing the stems first and then making the leaves with the green marker. And I tried to vary the shapes of the leaves, so I made some of them rounder and some more narrow, which just makes it look more natural. I ended up making 2 branches to fill out the circle, but not make it too full and also not put them too close together because I wanted to leave a white border around the leaves when coloring in the circle. I also tried to make the branches nice and full with some smaller branches on the sides, so it's not just one stem. Next, I'm using that same thick fineliner from before to make the outlines for the leaves as well as the stem, so I'm just tracing the shapes and I'm also adding a line through the middle for a bit more detail. As you can see, some of the leaves go over the stem, so I would just recommend outlining the leaves first, but it really doesn't have to be perfect, so just take your time. I also added 2 little stars to fill the space a bit more, and then I started filling out the circle with the yellow shade. I started around the outside of the circle and I tried to keep the white border around the leaves pretty consistent and sort of the same width, so just a few millimeters all around, but you can make it as thin or as thick as you want. I thought it just made it look a lot more graphic and kind of like stickers, which I really liked. To me, the easiest approach was first making the outlines and then coloring in the circle in the same direction because it can look a bit streaky otherwise. I also tried to not layer the marker too much because it makes it a bit darker if you go over it a few more times, and this way the color looks a bit more even, but with lighter colors like this it's usually not too noticeable as with darker colors, but it also depends on the type of marker a little bit. Lastly, I filled in some of the smaller spaces between the leaves so that the circle looks more complete, and I also added some small dots in black here and there, which I think makes the design look more finished. For the title, this time I went for a very simple font since there was already a lot of detail, and I tried to write it along the curve of the circle so it follows the shape nicely. I also decided to add a border with the green all around the outside of the page because it felt a bit empty otherwise, and I really love how it turned out, so let's move on to my habit trackers. For the title, I first used the green to make a border on the left side, and then I wrote habits into it with the same fineliner that I've been using, and I just used that same simple font. To decorate it a bit, I drew some smaller eucalyptus branches on the side, and I basically did the same process as for the cover page, so first the stem and the leaves with the light green, and then adding the outlines, and lastly the yellow as a background, except for this one I used a rectangle instead of a circle. Again, I left a bit of a white border around the leaves, this time a bit thinner since it's smaller overall, but I tried to keep it the same width all around. If you wanted to make a super clean edge, you could also use some washi tape around it, but I didn't think it was necessary, so I just kind of did it freehand. For my trackers, I did the same layout as last month because I realized how much I actually like it, and also because it was pretty fitting for this design, so I first used the yellow as a background for the titles, and each tracker is 7 spaces wide and 8 spaces tall. Next, I'm making the borders in black, and I just left one space underneath the titles as well as one space vertically in between each tracker and 2 spaces horizontally, so it perfectly fills out the page. Then I'm writing the titles, so this month I'm tracking my usual habits, which are doing my morning routine, getting up before 9 a.m, not using any socials in the morning, planning in my bullet journal, doing my stretches, and doing my nighttime routine. For the trackers, I'm writing the weekdays into the first row in black again, and I'm also using the green to make a line underneath them to balance out all of the yellow, and then lastly I'm also crossing out the days from January and March again. Underneath my daily habits, I'm also adding 4 weekly habits, and for the titles I alternated between the yellow and the green so that the yellow is not too overpowering. And to determine the length of each title, I wrote them first with pencil, and each letter fits into one of the spaces so it's nice and even. Then I wrote the titles with black, and this month I'm tracking making my weekly spreads, having a little self-care day, doing my weekly reset, and practicing piano. And to track them, I made 5 circles on the right side, 1 for each week, and then to fill them out, when I complete it, I will color it in, and I will cross it out if I don't. And then I just also added some lines next to the titles to fill the empty space. Lastly, to decorate the page, I also added more doodles on the bottom just like last month, so it kind of makes a border with the title on the top. Again, I drew some smaller eucalyptus branches and I made them all face in the same direction just because I didn't want them to look too chaotic, and it makes the page look a little bit more organized. Then I just added the black outlines and a few stars, and then I filled in the background with the yellow marker again. And in hindsight, I might have preferred it if the background for the habit trackers was green, but I do still like how this page turned out, so let me know what you think in the comments. Lastly, I just added some more black dots here and there, and let's move on to the other page. I made the title the exact same as before, so a green border on the left side around the title, and then some decorations on the right side. And then for the title, I also wrote it first with pencil, so I knew how large the border would have to be, and then I wrote it in black afterwards. For the decoration, I only drew 1 branch because the space is a bit shorter, but apart from that, everything stayed the same as before so that the spread looks nice and consistent. For this page, as always, I'm making some simple sections to plan out the month. So first I'm using the green and the yellow for the background of the titles, and the sections are 11.5 spaces wide because the title is a little bit longer like in the last video, so I can't quite split the page the same way I usually do, but I do still leave 2 spaces empty in between the sections horizontally and then 1 space vertically. Then I'm making the borders in black, and once again I'm leaving 1 space empty underneath the title for a bit more white space. The sections are always a little bit different in size, but I just sort of eyeball it, so there's no real measurement, and of course you can always just make them as big or as small as you want, depending on what you need. Next, I'm writing the titles in black, and I place them into the middle of each section, and I always have the same ones, so for my tasks, workouts, YouTube related stuff, self-care ideas, events and goals, but again you can include whatever you need. Lastly, I'm just adding some small stars into the lower right corner just to add a bit of detail, and that's it for this page, so let's move on to my first weekly spread of this month. For this one, I wanted to use a layout where I split the page into 12 equal sections, each one being 11 by 11 spaces, and then there are 2 spaces in between them horizontally and 1 vertically, which fills out the pages perfectly. In the first section, I'm making a little mini calendar, and I used the yellow for the weekdays on the top, and then I wrote week 1 underneath it in black, and also added a border with the green all around to make it look a bit more clean. Then for my daily sections, I first used the green as a background for the titles, and I left 2 sections empty, 1 on the bottom right of the left page, and then 1 on the top left of the right page, so that I can fill them with doodles later on. And I also had some space to add 2 more sections on the bottom of the right page, but I'll get to that later on. Then I'm making the borders in black, and I'm also leaving 1 space underneath the titles once again. Speaking of, I wrote the titles in black as well, and I used that same simple font and spaced out the letters a bit to keep things nice and consistent, and I also added the dates on the right side of the title. I included the last few days of January in this weekly spread so that both months end up having 4 weekly spreads in total. Then for the empty sections, like I mentioned, I wanted to fill them with doodles, so I started by drawing some eucalyptus branches, but more like the ones I drew for the cover page, so with a few stems coming out from the sides, and I also wanted to make the background circular again to break up the square sections a bit, which I think ended up looking really pretty. Overall, even though this might look more complicated as a setup, it was still pretty quick and easy to make, and the eucalyptus is also really easy to draw if you just take it step by step, so I hope you try it out if you want, and let me know if you enjoyed this theme. The color palette is also not really what I think of in February, but I really wanted something bright and fun again, so I thought why not, and this bright yellow definitely makes me happy when I look at it, so I hope you like it as well. Of course, if you do have any ideas for themes you would like to see me make, leave them in the comments down below. I do have quite a long list and it might take a while until I actually make one, but I always just love hearing your ideas. Lastly, I added those 2 more sections on the bottom of the right page, and I used the yellow for the title to make them stand out from the daily sections, and I just used them to write down my tasks for this week as well as upcoming events or to-dos for the next week. And that is it for this setup, so let's do a quick flip through. I have been wanting to revisit this sort of theme for a while now because I really loved it back when I first made it, and I'm also really happy with this new version. I think it's just really fun and bright, so let me know what you think down below. As some of you may know, I'm actually finally finished with my exams for my master's degree, and that means I have more time to dedicate to YouTube again. I'm not sure if I'll be posting more videos, but if you want to see specific videos, definitely leave your thoughts in the comments. Anyway, thank you so much for watching as always, and I hope I'll see you again next time. Bye!